Hey there, internet friends, and welcome to That D Plus Show. Class is in session for the only show from that nerdy site that lets you know what kind of quality to expect right from the name. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and each week we sit down with a guest to talk about a Disney Plus offering of their choosing. This show is made possible entirely by the support of our patrons over at patreon.com/thatnerdysite. So if you like the show and can support us over there, we would, of course, definitely appreciate it. But if you can't, no big deal. The fact that you're listening is awesome, and we would greatly appreciate it if you could like, subscribe, rate, review, and share with your friends everywhere possible. Joining me today, we have Frank Bazzani back. How you doing, Frank?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right, doing all right. You and I got to catch up a little bit over this last week while you were out here, both of us under unfortunate circumstances, but it was good seeing you recently, and I'm glad we can kind of reconvene here and chat about the movie of the day, which I don't think either of us actually suggested. I think it was actually a Cameron suggestion, but he wasn't able to make it in the at the last minute. But we're going to be talking today about Up, Up, and Away. This kind of came out as a pick when we were having our team meeting, basically last Sunday, I think. I think it was Cameron. Am I remembering that correctly, or was it you that had brought this to the table, Frank?
I think I had originally mentioned it, but Cameron was definitely like fully on board with like remembering this as like a classic.
Yeah, yeah. So and Cameron was going to join us, but based on when we sat down to record, we just couldn't. The schedule didn't line up, so he has provided some thoughts that we will share a little bit later. But in absence of him, I'll toss it to you, Frank, in terms of why pick this show. What about it kind of jumped out at you as a that D plus show?
So like this is another one of the like obviously one of the Disney Channel original movies, and it's one of the ones I had seen a few times growing up. And one of the things I had always loved about this movie is the fact that it was like superhero related. Like obviously like loved superheroes when I was a kid. And off the top of my head, this is the only like Disney original that involves like superhero related things as far as I can think. Um, and that's definitely like I think what like attracted me to this movie. And in terms of kind of wanting to go back and revisit it, I was curious because obviously this is probably going to sound like a weird comparison, but after like Sky High and even like My Hero Academia, like this is kind of like a weirder, cheaper version of those. So I think it's interesting to go back and revisit because it's technically like older before those too.
Yeah, yeah, certainly. And that's, I think, one of the things we were talking about was maybe Sky High, but we found out that Sky High, due to like pre-existing licenses or whatever, is not available on Disney Plus yet. It'll be coming to Disney Plus the end of the year. Yeah, I want to say December 1st is when the splash page for it on Disney Plus says it'll be available. So I think right now it's on Netflix, maybe, or it's certainly on one of the other streaming platforms. That's why it's not on Disney Plus. But that was kind of like that was in the same conversation. And yeah, I think there is an element of, superheroes being kind of all the craze now, and this was very much pre any of that for the most part. There were probably a smattering of superhero movies that had started like really launching around that same time, but I mean, I remember 2000 being like X-Men was when that really took off and all that stuff. So and then obviously the MCU wouldn't start for another 8 years in 2008. So yeah, this very much is a kind of a movie out of time almost. Based on just when it came out, because as we dive into the history lesson, this was originally released as a Disney Channel original movie on January 22nd, 2000. It has a nice brisk runtime of an hour and 17 minutes per Disney Plus. If you look at the IMDb page, it rounds it up to an hour and a half. I'm guessing that's for like the commercial breaks and stuff. In the Disney Channel original movie timeline of things, that puts this movie between Horse Sense, which was November 20th, 1999, a movie I've not heard of, but I'm sure somebody will want to dive into at some point, and The Color of Friendship, which I feel like I remember hearing that title, but also that seems like a very easily parodied title, so I don't know if I've actually seen that proper movie. But that came out February 5th, 2000. Branching out a little bit wider, this puts it between like bigger names like Johnny Tsunami and Smart House, which came out in mid 1999, and our movie from last week's episode, I believe, Phantom of the Megaplex, which was our kind of end of 2000 is when that one came out. Looking at the roll call and the who's who of this film, you have director and star Robert Townsend. He plays Bronze Eagle, as well as directed this film. Prior to this, I remembered him. I don't think I ever actually like saw the movie in theaters, but I feel like it's a movie I saw like on your TNTs or TBSs or something growing up. A movie called Meteor Man from 1993, which he was the writer, director, and star of. So kind of again, that in that superhero vein, Meteor Man was about a meteor came down, struck this guy, gave him superpowers. That like he doesn't have a kryptonite in that. It's just the powers wear off over time, and he has to get like recharged throughout the movie. But it was still like, especially for 1993, very novel to see like African American centric film about superheroes and stuff. He was also the creator and star of the series, 4-season series The Parenthood, from 1995 to 1999, which was basically like leading right up into this, again in 2000. And then he has most recently, he's been a director for a couple episodes of Black Lightning, kind of keeping it in the superhero vein of things. Writer Dan Berenson, you might remember from our episode a few weeks back of Eddie's $1 Million Cook-Off. He was the writer of that as well. And he also, before that, had done some episodes of Sabrina the Teenage Witch, including some of kind of the, event TV movie episodes of Sabrina Goes to Rome and Sabrina Down Under. And then also, as we touched on, Eddie's $1 Million Cook-Off and Halloween Town High and the other movies that we discussed back in the Eddie's $1 Million Cook-Off episode.
Was he also the one that was involved with Undressed? Was that him?
No, that was one of the other writers on that movie. Yeah, this guy was the PG version of the bunch kind of thing. Yeah, and this was the admittedly like the last one I remembered to go in and fill in, because like I'd put down the director and who was in it, and then I put down the starring and who was in it. I was like, oh crap, I didn't go back and like attach Dan Berenson, and it wasn't until like looking that up right before that I put two and two together that he had also done Eddie's $1 Million Cook-Off. So, yep, same guy. Our first, probably our first like repeat offender, so to speak.
I'm a big fan of his work. I'm glad I could bring him to the table twice.
yeah, clearly. His voice speaks to you. In terms of the stars of this, obviously Robert Townsend there playing Bronze Eagle, and all the things that he'd been involved in that I already mentioned. I really appreciate, this is one of the things that we'll dive into maybe a little bit more in terms of like the things I liked about this movie, but like I appreciate that he seems to really have been on the forefront of trying to celebrate like African Americans as superheroes and like create that as an image that like nerdy African American kids could see growing up. That just kind of jumped out at me is between Meteor Man and this, certainly, as kind of like a couple of projects that he really was the a spearhead on. You have Michael J. Pagan playing Scott, the kind of star character of the film, who had done How Stella Got Her Groove Back prior to this, and then he was later in The Gridiron Gang. You have Alex Datcher as the mom/warrior woman character, who had done a TV series for a season called Good Behavior with Sherman Hemsley, who's also featured in this. And she hasn't done too much recently. Her IMDb page is pretty sparse following this project and maybe a couple others in the early 2000s. Sherman Hemsley is probably the biggest star of this film, having played the iconic George Jefferson character from All in the Family and then into the Jeffersons series back in the 70s and 80s. He's playing Steel Condor here, and as I mentioned, he had also been he'd done a series with his daughter-in-law, I guess, in this film. So that was a a cool little thing, and he fit. I feel like the Mickey Rooney role that we had in Phantom of the Megaplex, of like established star coming in, kind of like lending this credence. Not that Robert Townsend wasn't a star as well in this, but Sherman Hemsley was very much like the stunt casting kind of like older superhero character. So I thought that was an interesting choice when, because I didn't look too much into this when I was going into it. So when he popped up on screen, I was like, oh, hey, very cool.
He's a highlight for me though too. Like I think he's like one of my favorite parts of the entire movie.
Yeah, yeah. You have Kevin Connolly playing Malcolm, who is probably best known these days as Eric E. Murphy from Entourage. And this was admittedly like one of his earlier roles, but he had prior to this been a regular on a series that I like had completely forgotten about until looking this up. A series called Unhappily Ever After, which was a very Married Like Children type sitcom from the mid to late 90s, and the whole like gimmick slash hook of it I remember being that the dad character was like a schizophrenic, and his other personality took the form of like a stuffed rabbit voiced by Bobcat Goldthwait, and in his kind of very iconic voice. Also, Nikki Cox was an actress in this who was like the redhead bombshell archetype that I remember, middle school to high school age Trevor had a crush on growing up, kind of thing. But Kevin Connolly, kind of in that. This seems to have been more or less his first like larger role, and standout kind of role outside of some smaller things. So I thought that was interesting to just see him, and then where his career has gone on into. And then a couple others that I want to shout out: Chris Marquette and Jamie Renee Smith, who are Scott's friends, Randy and Amy, respectively. Chris Marquette had done a lot of like little one-off sitcom-y type things before this, but I recognized him from the movie Fanboys, about fanboys trying to go see the Phantom Menace before it released. Kind of not a docudrama kind of thing, but like a comedy in the vein of a documentary. And Chris Marquette played Linus in that, who's he's the one with cancer that like the friends are all doing this voyage to try and go see it because they don't think he's going to have time. They don't think he's going to be around long enough to see the Phantom Menace. And then he was also most recently in the first season of the TV show Barry. He plays Bill Hader's like military buddy who Barry ends up having to kind of like tragically kill because he sees Barry's hitman lifestyle of things and stuff. I was like, oh yeah, that was definitely the same guy, aged up 20 years. And then Jamie Renee Smith immediately followed this with the Airbud Entertainment Presents MVP Most Valuable Primate. Do you remember anything about that movie, Frank?
Very vaguely. I've never seen it, but I feel like I remember that being like the trailer in front of like VHS tapes or like DVDs when I was a kid. Like that was never one of the ones I bought, but I think it was like a pre-roll for other ones.
Yeah, if you had to guess, without remembering maybe what sport the Most Valuable Primate plays in this Airbud type movie, what would you guess?
Oh man, I'm trying to remember because off the top of my head, I wanted to say it was basketball again, but then I think they might have mixed it up. So I think it might be like soccer or something.
This was actually hockey, ice hockey.
Oh,
Yeah, he's out there playing ice hockey, and Jamie Renee Smith was one of the human co-stars in that film.
one of the kids
Um,
that gets kicked off the team so that the monkey can join.
Probably something like that, or I think she probably played the friend to the monkey, and kind of support and champion of the monkey, because she probably was not on the team unless it was a co-ed team. I don't know. I've not actually seen it. I'm just going purely off of like the trailer and the original, like the images for that movie that popped up. But yeah,
I like the concept that they're just like, oh no, we can't have girls on the team because that's against the rules. But monkeys, it doesn't specifically state anything about that.
very true point. Yeah, I just love that. Like, I the thing that like amused me most about that was the Airbud Entertainment Presents kind of like it was definitely like we don't want you to think this is a ripoff of Airbud because we know it's a ripoff of Airbud. We're the ones ripping it off and just taking that gimmick of like a sports playing animal and turning it into another movie. So yeah, that was the last little one I wanted to highlight out there. Don't have I couldn't like IMDb did not have any trivia to pull for this one, and I didn't dive into like the deeper recesses of the internet. Outside of like the thing that really jumped out to me was, it was I thought it was very interesting that Robert Townsend, having done Meteor Man, kind of came back and did another African American centric superhero movie here a handful of years later. So does it hold up? What did you think? I have Cameron's thoughts here as well, but I'll dive into you first, Frank. What did you think of this movie?
Like I don't think it's like terrible, but it's hard for me to say like it holds up. Like I don't even remembering it, like trying to remember how I felt about it before. I think like I definitely liked it, but I don't remember it being like amazing, if that makes sense. But even going back to it now, it's just like it's even like it is worse than I remember, but I still don't think it's like terrible. I think there's even much worse like Disney originals, even probably like the one about like horse sense.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I this is the first time I remember seeing this one. Like I was certainly like watching Disney Channel original movies around this era and stuff, but I do not really recall this one. I don't know if I wasn't, big into superheroes at the time or what was the case, but like this felt new to me and felt largely unfamiliar. And I had been set up with the idea. I think Cameron had tweeted in or had messaged in our Slack channel before I sat down and watched it. Like, oh, this does not hold up. I regret picking this or whatever. I don't think he said that specifically, but he definitely like alluded to the fact that it doesn't hold up. And so I went in kind of like with very low expectations as a result of that. And I walked away. I was like, it was fine. It's not a great movie. But again, especially for like the time period that this takes place in and a Disney Channel original movie budget kind of thing. It's like it's fine. It's more or less what I would expect from some of that stuff. And what Cam said in particular is this movie has not aged well at all. Despite the poor material and incredible talent such as Robert Townsend and Sherman Hemsley, it fails on a contextual and graphical level. One thing I do admire, however, is the strong story structures it sets up and then duly follows through with. In the first 5 minutes, we're introduced to the kryptonite of the superheroes, and although it's never brought up why, the consistency is something to appreciate. Anyways, this feels like an introduction that the quality of work in my childhood is not nearly as good as I remember, and on many levels that kind of hurts. Up and Away gets a small woof from me. So Cameron, thinking that definitely he had been looking back on this movie through rose-tinted glasses. Let's talk about some favorite moments and or scenes. What are some moments in this or some ideas in this film that jumped out at you, Frank?
I love the call outs to like actual real superheroes.
Right?
Like
Yeah, that was one of the first things I thought is like they have the audacity to just be like, yeah, like we all exist in the same world, not only as like Marvel heroes but also DC heroes. Like they're
like
all just
all
here.
heroes.
Yeah. Like I grabbed lunch with Peter Parker and Mary Jane. They say a hi or something like that, or and like yeah, there's even a throwaway line at the end of the movie. It's like the Green Hornet was at like the birthday party. It's like nobody cares about or knows about the Green Hornet nowadays, let alone in 2000 pre the because that was the one that like Seth Rogen was in that movie
Yeah, yeah.
playing the Green Hornet. Yeah, so like I admired the kind of approach to just like they don't care at all about running this through legal or if Marvel in a pre Disney owned Marvel or DC or anybody's gonna sue these guys. They were just like whatever, we're just gonna name drop all the superheroes.
And like that's what I love too, especially because the first time they do it, I feel like, and then they obviously just keep moving, but I feel like it's just this moment where they're like, "What are you gonna do about it?" Like all we did was say his name, like we didn't
Hmm.
show him, like we didn't steal like the idea, and but I that was something, and they do it like a few times, but I definitely enjoyed that. Going back to your comment too about the Green Hornet, like that is something. Watching this now, I understood that reference, and I went, "Wow, there's no way I understood that that was even a reference to anything." Like I don't remember that being in the movie at all,
Hmm.
but I definitely like I get it now. But that's just because, like you said too, that's because of the Seth Rogen movie.
Yeah, it's like the most of what they talk about is like super. Everybody knows these superheroes, no big deal. And then yeah, they throw in like that super rare deep cut like reference in there. It's like whoa, what?
And like I also love that like there's the scene at the party where you actually get to see like some of the other heroes.
Hmm.
And there's that one dude is literally just Mr. Fantastic. Like he just and
Oh
he
yeah,
even does the arm stretch like across the room. Like, but I love that he's just like they're just like, yeah, we're not gonna say his name, but this is just him. Like
yeah,
he's just in the movie basically.
yeah, yeah. It's like so much of this, the especially kind of tipping off of Cameron's kind of like, oh, this doesn't hold up. I was watching this and like just immediately comparing it in my head to those like that like terrible Fantastic Four movie and the the '90s Captain America movie and stuff, like the ones that like got made just to keep hold of the licenses and stuff.
Mm.
That like everybody is like, no, those are bad movies, and it's just like, well, those they are bad movies, but they're also like what people were looking for or expecting in that era. So this very much felt of like that nature, especially because this doesn't have like, it can't hang its hat on these are all the superheroes you know. It is trying to introduce like a a completely made up family and mythos and whatnot, but it is also like like I love that it's just brazenly like, yeah, superheroes just exist in this world, and like you get superpowers by the time you're 14, and that's just kind of a normal thing that like people know, I guess, or
At least in the
yeah,
superhero community,
yeah,
like the
yeah,
lore
exactly,
is known.
yeah,
It's like
um,
Hogwarts though. If you don't get in by that date, you're out.
yeah, yeah. You are up the creek. Yeah, it was a like I liked that was just kind of a like it was a bold choice, and I was like I respect that. I appreciate that just yeah. Oh yeah, I was just with Peter and Mary Jane. They say hi. And it's like, oh yeah, you're just fully going on, and what like Steel, Sherman Hensley's character
Steel Condor.
Steel Condor, like lamenting that he was apparently doing it before Superman, and then Superman gets a publicist, and suddenly he's the Man of Steel, and it's like, okay, sure, yeah, you can throw that down, even though like we've known Superman from like the 1920s on or whatever. Sure.
And I
Yeah,
love that too because that's also when like the dad Bronze Eagle is also then like, oh come on dad, like he does that thing of like not this again, like he's heard this like a million times already,
yeah,
and probably so have these kids, but that's why I just like I like that whole like moment, like that's another one of my like favorite parts. But
yeah,
that's why like I guess like that's why like one of my favorite things too is like Sherman Hensley, like I think he does a great job, like but I mean he was always amazing.
yeah. And I think like one of the things I liked is how I like the ingenuity of Scott basically trying to trick his family, and by doing it by like by pretending he's got super strength, by like pre taking the door off the hinges, and like nobody catches it. But I appreciate that like as the foil to that. Sherman Hensley is the one that like recognizes what's going on and knows that he's kind of faking it and it's all an act kind of thing. I appreciated that like he saw through the ruse, because yeah, the thing I was thinking otherwise is like, well, clearly Super Smarts was not like throughout the rest of this family.
Yeah.
Like the mom and dad just immediately are like, oh my god, he's got super strength, and oh my god, he can fly, even though we can't see that he's flying, or we're just like going off of like nothing else outside of like the desire and the want for our kid to be able to fly.
And some
um,
rustling in a tree.
yeah, some rustling in a tree. So yeah, I was like, it was a clever way of like trying to trick the family into how he's got these superpowers, even if it doesn't like at all hold up if your parents have any kind of like rational intelligence.
Yeah.
What did you think of the of kind of the villain plot?
Yeah, like I guess like it makes sense, and it's not honestly like they even have like a terrible plan, and it clearly works, right? Like I guess it's kind of like it's definitely that dumb like late 90s, early 2000s, like, oh, we're gonna make a software and it's gonna mind control everybody, right? Like,
Yeah, nobody knows how technology works, so we can get away with anything by saying it's technology.
and it's like, and it's gonna be on all the CDs, and we're gonna hand them out like every day or whatever. And then I'm like, I also love that they gave these kids like computers and like they're printing them CDs with like a booklet like every day or whatever. Like
Yeah.
so much money goes into this operation just to get kids to like steal money out of their parents' purse. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, the donations that they're getting from their parents probably are not actually like funding the beta test that they're doing. The production costs that's all going into that. But yeah, like I love the idea that like, oh, what if like what if those AOL demo discs, 1,000 hours of internet or something that everybody had somehow also been like brainwashing people into like, and I love that like it starts it's almost like Iron Man 3-esque in that like it's the original intent was like, better humanity and better the environment and stuff like that, and it just immediately gets warped into something else. But yeah, like the Kevin Connolly's character just coming in and like just completely oozing like evil mastermind type thing and just kind of mooching off this. And I love that, yeah, it all boils down to like, oh, well, the girl really wanted to use it to like clean up the environment and stuff. And he's like, yeah, but also we can get paid.
and that's what I love. Like not only the probably one of the I don't know if this is good or bad. I guess I'm going back and forth on it now that I'm trying to say it. But like he immediately tries to rob a bank. Like they see the
Yeah,
software works on kids, and he's like, okay, day one test worked. Let's go rob a bank. And it kind of works, but then that guy like sneezes and the whole thing
exactly.
goes sideways. Like,
Yeah, that was like that was one of those where it's like that wasn't really explained at all well, because yeah, it is like because they later say, well, it was designed for children, not adult brains or whatever. And it's like, okay, but it was working on adult brains until somebody sneezed. What did the sneeze do that like snapped people out of it or whatever? Like what? That was weird. And yeah, it was just like I almost like because of just how bad the sneeze was, I almost thought it was like the guy trying to sabotage the plan or something like that, and somehow
hmm.
like the sneeze was the cue that was going to wake people up. But yeah, it was just that was clearly me putting way too much thought into the motivation of that sneeze, when it was really just, hey, they need some kind of physical action that snaps these people out of this thing. That we're going to later explain away by saying like, oh, it's because they've got adult brains instead of kid brains.
Well,
Yeah,
and that's why I like it with and like and I like that I get that it like it sets up like yeah he doubles down on like he is the bad guy, and then like they even set up like okay, well, right now it only works on kids, like it sets all that up and you get to see some like crime fighting like heroics side of it.
mm-hmm.
But like the thing that messes me up about it though is that she's not immediately like, well, you tried to rob a bank, like like
Yeah,
she's like is this eco activist, like he doesn't eat meat, like just wants to do all this good in the world, and she just doesn't mind that he tried to rob a bank. She doesn't think he's evil. She's just like, yeah, well, I guess we do need money for this operation. Like,
yeah. Yeah, she kind of is like incredibly naive to everything, and continues to be largely throughout the movie. Because like he also tries to blow her up, and she immediately goes back and is like, "Oh, that wasn't a problem." Um, so yeah,
that was one part I guess I did think is still is funny is when she says to him like he's explaining the plan to her of like the building's gonna blow up and he's gonna come to save you and you'll put the tracker on him, and she's like, why me? And he's like, because we have to put the tracker on him. Like he's just like doesn't say anything. He's just like, no, this needs to happen. Like,
yeah. It was certainly a choice. Um, yeah, I mean, but overall, like I thought it was fine. Like it didn't it it didn't bother me as much as it seemed to bother Cam going back to this, but also Cam probably was looking at it with like rose tinted glasses, so seeing that like shattered a little bit, probably hurt things a tad. and then yeah, especially just in the era we live now, where we are in like a glut of superhero movies, and you've got and your pick of the litter, kind of coming into this and seeing like, oh, just generic superheroes, um, like 101 kind of stuff. It's like, yeah, does it? I mean, in that regard, I will certainly agree that yeah, it doesn't hold up. But for what it was, it's fine. I thought. Trying to think if there were any moments that like in particular I was like, oh my god, this was just so egregiously bad that I wanted to highlight it. And like really there wasn't, outside of, I mean, yeah, some of those just like, this doesn't make any sense. What did you think of the whole conceit of like their weakness is aluminum foil?
I'm like, I guess like Cam brings up a good point that like they don't. Well, they I guess they do explain why. They said it does something to their like biology or whatever. Like it messes with something inside them, and they like they lose their power. Like it messes with their version of like metachlorians.
Yeah,
But like I guess he brings up a good point I've never thought about even rewatching it now. Like yeah, I guess they don't explain like why or where that comes from. But I guess like I'm okay with it. Like they needed kryptonite, and it's kind of funny that it is just this everyday normal thing. Like they even set it up immediately when he's just like, "Oh, my mom made you some bread," and they act like it's a bomb. Like
yeah. And I didn't catch that it was the aluminum foil that they're reacting to at first. I thought I went with their thing of like, oh, they're like, I mean, I didn't think it was like they're allergic to zucchini or whatever. I was like, oh, zucchini is their kryptonite. That's a weird choice, but okay. And it's not until like later on when like the aluminum ball gets thrown in the cafeteria or whatever, and the brother like catches it, that it gets like fully explained. I was like, oh, okay, it was just the aluminum foil that they were responding to, not the zucchini bread. But also like it made me wonder, and so what I was kind of hoping we would see, that I feel like even in the climactic battle, like if it was there, I just completely missed it. But like I was thinking, oh, because the son, the Scott isn't superpowered, he can break them out of the aluminum foil prison
mm.
because aluminum foil doesn't have that impact on him. But they never really explored that idea.
Yeah, because they definitely don't explore him like helping the family or freeing them. The only thing they kind of do is that she pretends to like tie him up with it, and he just
Yeah,
goes along like, oh yeah, this hurts me, so that she can like kind of like get him out of there.
yeah, but how would she know it doesn't hurt him?
Because I guess because I guess the idea there would be that like since he tried to save her earlier, she knows he doesn't have any powers really. So I guess maybe she's just like, oh, he's clearly powerless. Like
Yeah. That's again. That's we're putting way more assumptions into the character than I think the writing did of the movie. But yeah, like that. So that's something I would have liked to have seen, was like if they had really explored like that he's not superpowered, but because he's not superpowered, he also doesn't have that weakness, and he can help the family out of that jam, as a result. But instead, he kicks a soccer ball and finally gets that like goal that he was always trying to get,
I,
that he could not nail earlier in the movie.
that is one of the things I remember from like when I was younger that I liked about it, and that is still one of my favorite parts of the movie. Is that they have that like the way they ultimately like win is like this Home Alone style like bubble wrap and like soccer balls like
Yeah,
against like these clearly incompetent adults. Like I even remember as a kid being like, wow, these guys are super incompetent. Like
yeah, yeah. They think bubble wrap popping is like gunshots, just like mowing down nothing. Yeah, there was. Yeah, it was a very weird group. And then the non super powered friend or whatever is going out there, and like yeah, he's not affected by by the aluminum foil until he eats it, and it messes with his filling. I thought that was a nice little bit. And in that moment where like the kid was just going nuts and doing like all sorts of kung fu poses and stuff, I was like, okay, this definitely seems like this is why this kid was acting and getting like these kinds of roles, because he was willing to go out there and be goofy and do whatever. I think he's probably like a couple years earlier than Shia LaBeouf, but he seemed like he was basically as game as Shia LaBeouf ended up being for a lot of that like weird outlandish kids acting type stuff.
I think that's like right on for him, especially because like even with the parts of them in like the van, like if you ever had those memories of like being a kid and like a carpool thing, like he's definitely like the one weirder kid who's always like just being like weird or like yelling about stuff.
Yeah,
Like and
and he's the
he plays it
he
great.
yeah he's the one who wants to be Kato from the Green Hornet. Clearly, a character I'm sure that actor had no idea about. Because there's no reason that he would have known anything about that. But yeah, anything else you want to highlight, good or bad, from the movie?
The only other one thing I guess that does come to mind is like it was really weird to see that the bad guy was the E from Entourage. I had seen this movie as a kid, and since having not seen this movie in a long time, I've seen that entire series, and that is what I would obviously associate him with. So
Mm-hmm.
this was just weird, like turning it on, and he immediately pops up in like the first 2 seconds, and I was confused.
Yeah. We meet like the villains and their master plan first, as before we dive into any of the superhero stuff.
Yeah, yeah, and what I love about him ultimately is, I mean, he is a pretty good actor, so I think he does like the pretty good like skeezy kind of villain guy thing, and I think he does the pretty good like coin flip thing of like being the skeezy bad guy, but then being really nice to people, so that he's like he seems like the good guy, like when he's telling all those kids to like recycle. So
Yeah,
like I like that moment where he's like and does the whole thing, the presentation, he's like telling people to recycle and pick up, and then he does the thing where he's like, "I hate kids," and then he just litters on the ground and they leave.
yeah.
Like that's just one of the other moments that I think is like a particularly like funny part of the movie.
Yeah, or I like how they test out the brainwashing component of it by like, oh, all of the kids are going to wear blue, and then who didn't do the homework, and it's the one kid in red.
That's what I love, and he's about to burst into tears. Like that actor was just like in that moment.
Yeah, that kid was probably like, it was probably super method in that like they probably super outcast him all day on set. They didn't let him hang out with anybody else on the film, and they just kind of like put him in that seat and was like, you're going to wear red, and all these people look down on you because you're wearing red. And he's just, yeah, he's there heartbroken about it, but doesn't realize it's just because he didn't do his homework.
Yeah, and he's basically in that moment. That actor is just like, "What homework? Like, what is this?" It's like his actual nightmare.
Yeah. I love that the teacher like kind of catches on, like she recognizes that it's weird that like all of the kids are wearing blue, but also she's oblivious.
Well, so she totally like I feel like I guess she ultimately probably is oblivious, but I feel like my thing on her is that she's like she realizes that they're doing something and it probably is bad, but it still helps her because I guess they're like programming it in there like be nice or show up to class on time or whatever, like so
Yeah.
I'm like, is it helping her in some way? And she's just like, you know what? I don't care. Like, I'm just gonna let this happen. Like,
And also she's not having to like assign homework really. It's just do whatever the program tells you guys. I'm going to go home and drink.
yeah, exactly. Like, and then she's just gonna like do whatever while these superheroes run around out town and blow stuff up. Apparently,
Yeah.
like I just don't get the read. Like, it's such a like they obviously established with the family, like, oh, superheroes exist and everybody's aware of this, and like the kids are fans of these, like even the family that he has. But then like when they're in these school moments, like, do you ever feel like superheroes are just running around outside like blowing stuff up? Like,
I mean, yeah, that is like when they all get like paged at the party or something, and it like has this montage of like everybody's different communication devices just being whatever random props they could find and throw on people's wrists. There was a moment where I was like, yeah, why isn't anybody else responding to these things? Like, why is it only the central family that we're seeing like cover events and stuff like that? Why isn't it? Why aren't we seeing, or why isn't anybody else at this party going to like deal with this fire? Which also, like, it was a lady in a burning building, and the fire department is just standing outside not doing anything. Why? Yeah, why was that a superhero necessary thing?
I'm with
Weird.
you. I'm with you on that. And then even the Mr. Fantastic or whatever is legit just like, oh, this is 101. Send the 14-year-old kid. He could do it. Like, what? Like,
Yeah,
what? It's also
yeah,
his birthday.
yeah. Yeah, go have fun, birthday boy.
Go
Go
jump
save
into a
go save a
burning
woman
building.
from a burning building. We don't know if your powers are that you're fireproof or not, but go have at it. Yeah. And then yeah, he just bikes off, and it's like, yep, classic in over his head kind of thing. I almost thought they were going to do a Die Hard reference when because they are climbing down on the fire hose out of the fire. So I thought they were going to like when it was coming loose and it does come loose. I thought they were going to like swing back into the building or something like that. So I was mildly disappointed when instead the dad just shows up and like catches them before they fall to the ground.
Just saves the day.
Yeah. Um, I did. There is another moment I do want to shout out was I love the dad taking the kid up for like the flying lesson, and just being like, "No, I wouldn't drop you without warning. This is a warning, by the way." And then he just drops him.
Yeah, I love that. And then he like, and then he immediately brings him to the soccer game, and he's all messed up. So I'm like, you think he like went all the way to the ground, like he just fell,
Yeah,
like
yeah. No, I mean, he clearly had to have caught him before landing because otherwise the kid would have died and not
that's right.
shown up at the
He doesn't
soccer
have
game.
superpowers.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it was a it was a fine movie. I thought it was fun. Not a waste of a couple hours. It was fine. I certainly don't ever need to watch it again, but it did not I do not have the grievance toward it that I think Cameron did of thinking this was like, ruining that memory of his childhood or whatever.
I definitely don't view it as negatively as he did, like, or at least like in hindsight, like I still am like, it's hard for me to be like, oh, this is a great movie or like I recommend it or anything like that. But I don't think, like I said, I think there's much worse like movies and much worse like our Disney originals too. And it's
Yeah.
still, I still think it's like you said, it's fun to revisit, and then like it's only like an hour, like 20 minutes, like so it's not even that bad really.
Yeah. All right, let's dive into the report card and grade the movie from A plus to F. I think I'm going to give it kind of a solid C, kind of across the board. Like I said, it's not a great film by any means, and certainly if like looking at this in the wider scope of like movie making, it would probably do less. But as I usually do, I tend to grade like on a curve, and this is on the Disney Channel original movie curve. And this was a fine Disney Channel original movie. I like that it is, especially for the time in which this was made. I like that it's putting like an African American family of superheroes out there, and like there's nothing in there. It's nothing. It's not about them being like an African American family of superheroes. It's just about them being a family of superheroes that happen to be African American. I thought that was like a cool choice, especially for 2000 when they very easily could have made this and given just kind of the culture, could have gotten probably more eyes on it if it had been a white family or something like that. But I liked that it was, Robert Townsend and Sherman Hemsley and them kind of playing superheroes. How about you?
That's something like I always appreciated about it too. Like that I always like appreciated that kind of like spin on it, especially like you said for the time. Overall, like I guess still even grading on the curve of Disney originals, like I don't want to go too high on it, but I guess I'll go like I think I would go like C plus.
C plus? Yeah, it's fair.
Yeah, like because I'm torn between C plus or B minus, and I think I'm just gonna go C plus. Like like I think like I said, like I've been saying, I think there's like way worse Disney originals out there, especially for how many there are. But like I
Mm-hmm.
think this is still just like a fun, fine time. Like it's not particularly amazing. Like it just kind of something you could throw on in the background maybe, especially if you
Yeah.
like want to revisit it.
Yeah, and that's more or less what I did on this one too. I've been playing a lot of Witcher 3, and so I had this kind of playing in the background while I was working on some other stuff. I think outside of The Witcher, and it was fine. Yeah, no, not like it was not offensive to my sensibilities. It was it was a fine movie. So extra credit if you like this. Other suggestions that Disney Plus provided are Brink and Johnny Tsunami, which those I will stand by. I don't think I would have thought of them in terms of like in the context of this, but those are certainly it'll probably be a little heartbreaking when we get to those movies and actually have to look at them and not through rose tinted glasses because I will probably end up walking away from those feeling like Cameron did on this one.
I thought I watched I love both of those movies, and I definitely feel like I would stand by them. I haven't seen Johnny Tsunami since I was a kid, but I watched Brink like 2 years ago, and I still think it was great.
Hmm. You also have Avalon High, Gotta Kick It Up, a couple movies I've not heard of
See Step
anything of.
Day.
Actually, I mean, pretty much all of these I've not heard anything of. But Zapped came on, and I recognized from the thumbnail a young Zendaya, so she's in that one. The Poof Point, as we touched on, I think also in Eddie's $1 Million Cook-Off, and certainly in last week's Phantom of the Megaplex, Halloween Town pulls up in here.
Classic.
Xenon,
Also great.
girl of the 21st century, and it's not available on Disney Plus yet, but it has a page dedicated to it, so I'm throwing it on here. Sky High, which admittedly I still have not seen, so I look forward
Oh
to
my
that
God.
when that comes to Disney Plus and we can do a dedicated episode on it. Because yeah, it's all built around superheroes and all that kind of stuff. So Sky High, of course, will be an appropriate offering in the same vein of these.
I can't wait for that because I love that movie since it came out, and all I could say too is it is the like way, way, way better version of this movie.
Yeah, there was. I want to say it was a couple years ago at one of the Kind of Funny events. I think like the hotel room of people that I was staying with. I think I was out doing an event or something at the time, so I was not there. But like I remember coming back to the hotel room and everybody had watched Sky High, and so they were also like trying to figure out who everybody was in like the community and putting them in place of that film. I don't remember who I ended up being assigned.
I think you were the dad who is Kurt Russell.
I don't. I
No,
don't
you
think I
weren't.
was though.
You
I think I was
were.
like the coach or something like that. Maybe
Yeah, you're the. I just yeah, you're right. Because you're the coach, and he's played by the guy from the Evil Dead, whose name I can't think of right now.
Bruce Campbell. That's right. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, that was you, and then that like I think that's still super funny.
Yeah. We talked about it a little bit. I know when I was out there for kind of our launch weekend, we talked, and I know like Jazz is super a fan of that one as well as Logan. So I'm sure that'll when we eventually get around to doing the episode on Sky High, I'm sure it'll be a nice, fun-filled and a hearty That Nerdy Cast filled episode.
The first ever 3 hour Deep Plus show.
Yeah. In terms of extracurriculars, anything else you're watching on Disney Plus these days?
And not particularly still. Like I'm terrible about watching things, so it's mostly the stuff for this show. And so I guess just watch Up and Away, I guess.
Yeah, I'm more or less in the same boat in that I've just like Disney Plus. Apart from the things we're watching for the show, has not been kind of the focal point. I just finished watching like BoJack Horseman, for example, on Netflix, and a lot of my time these days has been spent playing The Witcher 3 because I'm still really enjoying hopping back into that game in the wake of the TV series or the Netflix series. But yeah, I especially as we get later into this month, you have stuff like the Clone Wars coming back, so I'm looking forward to jumping back into that. So yeah, that's gonna do it for this week's episode of That D Plus Show. Thank you, Frank, for joining me to discuss Up and Away. We're sorry we couldn't get Cameron in here as well, but at least he provided his kind of like preliminary thoughts or his thoughts on the film as well. You can follow Frank at Irrelevant Jokes. Anything you want to shout out, Frank?
Just check out, I guess, our YouTube channel, youtube.com/thatnerdysite. You may even already be listening to this podcast on there, but there's a couple videos already on there, and I'm working on some more. And especially now, once we go out to PAX, there should be a bunch of great content coming up on there.
Yeah, we got our PAX East 2020. There's going to be a ton of stuff on the website, including a lot of hopefully video kind of discussions and previews on the games we're playing at PAX East. You can follow me at Trevor J. Starkey, and I will go ahead and shout out in Frank's place. Frank and Christian and Logan went and saw Sonic the Hedgehog, and this week's That Nerdy Show is their spoiler cast reactions to the film. So check that out. You can follow all of the latest from the site at That Nerdy Site. If you would like to be on the show, on that D Plus show, you can go to thatnerdysite.com/D Plus guest and fill out a little form there and let us know what Disney Plus offering you'd like to chat about, and I will be in touch on getting that together and hopefully scheduling guests on here in the near future. If you like what you heard, please like, rate, review, subscribe, share with your friends, all that fun stuff. As I said at the top, this show is entirely possible thanks to our Patreon community. So if you can support us on Patreon at patreon.com/thatnerdysite, you kind of help keep the lights for this show on. So thank you for joining us. As always, stay nerdy and be good to each other. Class dismissed.